Right, good evening, everybody. Can I welcome you to the Town Hall, to a meeting of the Cabinet, both members of the public and visiting councillors. So the usual thing I have to say, in the event of emergency, follow us. There are no practice alarms planned, but if an alarm does sound, please evacuate Town Hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street, and then to the car park behind the Town Hall in St Runwood Street. In case of any disturbance which requires the Cabinet to withdraw from this room, councillors should withdraw to the Mayor's Parlour using the doors behind me and await further advice. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel. Will be available to listen to afterwards. Use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, is welcomed, but as ever, we'll request it to use them discreetly, not to disturb the meeting, set them to silent, which I must do in a second, not use voice or camera flash functions. Speakers are reminded that microphones are to be used at all times. Right, so I don't mean to just remind those who might find it helpful about what the Cabinet do. Cabinet's the main executive body of the Council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision-making on Council services, makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet's made up of 7 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. I've got 2 apologies, and we'll go around the table in just a second. So for those who very understandably are not aware, my name is David King, as leader of the Council, and I'll get to my colleague's absence in a moment. So, Mark.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, representative for Wivenhoe and Cabinet Member for Resources.
Councillor Luxford Vaughan, Cabinet Member for Planning, Environment and Sustainability and Ward Member for Wivenhoe.
Councillor Paul Smith, good evening to you all, Portfolio Holder for Housing and Ward Member for St Anne's and St John's.
Councillor Alison Jay, Ward Member for Highwoods and Portfolio Holder for Economic Growth and Transformation.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Pam Donnelly, Chief Executive.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you all. The 2 Cabinet members not here tonight are Councillors Goss and Councillor Anne Sommers. Both would attend were it not for the fact that we're in the pre-election period, and on the advice of the monitoring officer, we are taking, as we should, a particular care about attendance, because both of those are parliamentary candidates. That will also affect how I would like, and I say this to visiting councillors in particular, how Cabinet and those visiting will address sensitive, potentially sensitive issues on the paper. One example is the housing paper, which is, having read it yet more time, and issues of fact encompassed there, sensitively, factually put, in my view. Well, my request of Cabinet and those visiting is we, as I say, respect the guidance from the monitoring officer and leave the politics outside the door. There is enough out there, I think we can all agree, for another occasion, another time. That particular paper, as an illustration, is a factual one. There'll be lots of room downstream for debates about choices and political positioning and the like. Right, so that's it. That's almost there. We'll get ourselves into the meat of the agenda. So item 2, items.
There are no urgent items, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I just ask members with one? Councillor Jay.
Oh yes, item 11.1, where I've got a disclosable pecuniary interest as an employee of St John's and Highwoods Community Association, and having taken advice from the monitoring officer, I'll be withdrawing from the meeting during the discussion and decision.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Smith.
On the same item, I'm a trustee of the St Anne's Community Centre, which is mentioned in the report. On the advice of the monitoring officer there, I have a declarable interest, but I may stay and may participate and vote on that matter.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Item 4, minutes of the last meeting, or the last 2 meetings, 13th of March and 22nd of March. Agreed. Thank you. Right, item 5 is have your say. I'm going to take these in the order that I have them. And Professor Jane Black is joining us remotely from the perils of Zoom on the subject of Ferry Marsh. Now, why does one look at a screen when the person's not there? But now, Professor Black, Jane, if you're about, perhaps we can have you come forward.
Right, I'm here. I can't see myself though. Now, Ferry Marsh was gifted to provide public open space, and Colchester signed a covenant to this effect. It was the only open space for the housing built south of the railway line in the first decade of the century. The whole of the gifted area was in principle open to the public for around 18 years, and it was shut subsequent to the flooding event. Excuse me. The legal advice on whether the proposals on access being put forward are consistent with the covenant is not available to the public. It's in section Part B of your agenda. Now, I'm told that earlier advice was that the paths around the site, plus a small loop proposed, were considered adequate. Now, these boundary paths were already accessible to the public before the gift of the land, and only the public footpath along the seawall lies on the land gifted to the council. These paths are also used by cyclists. If the path across the marsh is closed, then the only additional public access benefit for residents resulting from the gift of the land will be a very short loop shown in blue on the map in Appendix B of the report, with an access point relatively remote from the housing. And if Barrier Marsh is flooded post-2025, this short loop will be the only open space south of the railway that is not also used by cyclists. Now, the council has a duty to support the biodiversity, but also should provide green space for the benefit of residents. Accessible green spaces are very beneficial to mental health. Unfortunately, biodiversity and access can conflict. The main argument for closing the path across the marsh would seem to be the public disturbance to relatively reclusive birds. Including an area owned by the Crown, which falls within the SSI, there are around 7 hectares of land now primarily covered by reeds. Some of this area is pretty secluded. It was some time before the ranger discovered a few years back that somebody was promoting biodiversity on part of it by growing cannabis. The proposals do not seem to strike the right balance between protecting wildlife and providing public access. Compromise is needed. Restrict access to the marsh, to the path across it, rather than the whole of it, and either ban dogs or require them to be kept on a short lead. This would leave undisturbed areas for reclusive birds. A proposal to provide some internal water control measures to prevent the marsh from drying out would seem desirable, but the water levels should not be so high that they result in ferry track being flooded, as this is part of the local footpath network and is apparently being relied on to satisfy the conditions of the covenant. If some open water is desired on the marsh, then this should be provided via scrapes rather than raising the water level above that of the current ditches. The relatively rare ditch assemblage is cited as one of the reasons for the area being designated as an SSI. Greater clarity is needed on what the proposed water levels are. Now, with regard to the public consultation which was held, the plan shown in Appendix B of the report was not actually shown on the consultation boards. I supported restrictions to access, but this did not imply that I supported closure of the path across the marsh. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask Councillor Luxford Vaughan to respond. Thank you.
Good evening, Professor Black. I think there's quite a few points you've raised. I have subsequently, thank you for giving us notice of what you were going to say, I've asked for officers to respond to some of those things. Just a point of clarity, the seawall path, I have been told, is not accessible to cyclists. It doesn't mean they don't use it, but that it's for pedestrians only, and that's the reason why we've got the surface finish there that we have got. Although obviously the trail is, you didn't mention Rowhedge Ferry Loop, which is also open. I suppose the issue about the legal advice, as we've spoken, I've read it. I'm not entirely sure why it's restricted public access, but it doesn't really help very much, because the direct question was asked, can we do this? And we were told all the things we couldn't do. And they were things like opening a golf course and charging lots of money for it. Mark actually gave me the best reason why, you know, as long as it's enjoyed by the public, whether they've got access to it or whether they're looking at it from a distance, is something like the lake at Highwoods. You wouldn't expect to be able to, you know, be inside the lake, but you can still enjoy it as an open space. The point you've made about water levels, the whole point of investing in the sluice is to prevent flooding, and we are working very closely with Essex Wildlife Trust and Natural England, who approve of the measures we've done, but also it will be monitored over the long term, and will take expert advice as to how those levels will or won't affect the biodiversity that we have, because obviously it has changed because of the flooding in previous years, and now we want to try and set that so that we can maintain what we've got. The last thing is the point about dogs on leads. I could mention somebody you know who will always let their dog off a lead regardless of whether you threaten anything to them. So unfortunately, although, you know, most dog owners are highly responsible, it wouldn't necessarily prevent dogs getting access to that area, which obviously will scare off any rare birds, which is the reason why obviously it was closed, not necessarily just because it was flooded, but because we had certain breeding species there that are incredibly rare, and we needed to preserve those sites for that reason. I know you're not going to be happy, but I think on balance we have done the right amount of research, and this is the recommendation that we've been given by officers. And I think, you know, it's not going to make everybody happy, but long term it is going to prevent the flooding. And my main concern is that we still need to have access along the trail, and we don't want the railway disintegrating into the marsh either, both of which were threatened if we didn't do something. So I think, you know, as a compromise, this is probably the best we're going to get.
Thank you very much. Professor Black, you have a right of reply for a minute if you choose to exercise it.
Well, one could say that people are a nuisance everywhere, and this doesn't mean that we ban people from the countryside in general. And as regard to the trail, I understood that Cabinet had already agreed to doing the work on the main sluice, which will stop the flooding, excessive flooding. It's whether raising the water levels on the marsh by internal barriers, internal sluices, which is on the works programme proposed, will actually result in the flooding of the track, which is sometimes called Ferry Road Track and sometimes called Rowhedge Ferry Road. Perhaps I could ask, is the proposal to improve the sluice actually agreed and going to happen?
Professor Blank, can I stop you there? But thank you very much. I could see from the papers of the Environment and Sustainability Committee, which are part of the recommendations on the item, how much time, effort and energy you've spent on this, and how cooperative a process in the round that's been. So on behalf of Cabinet, my thanks to you for making the time for that, and again tonight. We'll move on to the next on our list, and Pauline Hazel. Hello, Pauline, you know this place really well. Very warm welcome to you.
Good evening, Cabinet. My subject this evening is interpretation boards for Gosbecks Archaeological Park. Many of you will know my long-term interest in this area. Mr. Mike Hardy addressed you on this subject on the 22nd of November 2023, providing you with the background to our repeated requests for such boards covering the late Iron Age and the details of the excellent proposal made during the Conservatives' period in control, 2021 to 22. The portfolio holder at the time, former Councillor Burrows, undertook to look into the matter and discuss with officers, after which she would respond. Almost 4 months later, her response, and I quote, was, "Frank Hargrave informed me that the monies had been used for the upkeep of the space, such as grass cutting." Mr. Hardy explained that the officer's information was not creditable, but former Councillor Burrows made no further comment. Our subsequent Freedom of Information request has established that far from the Gosbecks Reserve being spent, the balance on the 31st of March this year was £70,321.32. The response provided by former Councillor Burrows was therefore inaccurate, and by any reasonable standards is thoroughly unprofessional and unacceptable. It is manifestly obvious widening the scope of our city's heritage is in its best interest. The project is drafted, the supporting artwork is identified and available, the outline costing is established, and the non-taxpayers funding is available. Will the leader now assure me that the extent proposal explained on the 22nd of November 2023 will be taken seriously and that he will ensure it's implemented with diligence and alacrity? Mr. Clifford has a pack with all the background papers on this, which he will give to you afterwards. And I would just like to say that this is the third time that we have brought this before the council, so I'm hopeful that finally this, what is pretty much a modest request, will be put into operation. And it goes without saying really that I will be and my colleagues will be helpful in any way we can, and will be pleased to do anything we can to bring this matter forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pauline, for calling that again. Pauline, thank you very much for your time and trouble and your, again, the city's always better for the investment of people with a passion. And thank you for running us through that past history. So I can't speak for Councillor Burrows, but clearly there's been a miscommunication or misunderstanding somewhere along the lines. I have dug into some of this background myself, but I haven't got a complete story. There appears to have been some differences and conversations over a couple of years, and there's no point, I think, in rehearsing them now. But what I will do, your question here was, would it be taken seriously? So my promise is, I will take it seriously. I'll pick this up with Councillor Somers when she's available, and we'll pick this up with the lead officers here. And my personal view is there should be scope to look at the state of the observation and the instructional signage and information that's available on the site as part of other possibilities, but the rest are quiescent. So let's have a look at this and let's have another conversation. I think it's right at this time that we, given that there is, I think, 70k, as you said, in the pot as a dairy, we should try to develop a long-term, broad view at least of what we should do with that, rather than have it sit there and those with an interest find they can't get taken, as you said, seriously. So we'll come back to you, and I'll be personally interested in seeing this come to some sort of conclusion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's most appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed. Jocelyn Law. Hello, Jocelyn. Welcome. Again, you know this place really well. I know you've got an item here about military compensation, but I know you've got a secondary item, as I understand it. You would like to pick up an item in the agenda. So if you'd like to just run through those two, and then we'll respond on both counts.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, as you may know, some councils exempt military compensation from the means tests of benefits such as housing benefit, council tax support, discretionary housing payments and disabled facilities grants. Now, I know how committed our council is to supporting our armed forces. You know, Council Leader, I know you're the armed forces champion. You know, my family has historic and contemporary links to the armed forces, like I'm sure many other families do. And I think we're already mindful this week of all weeks how much and the sacrifices that our armed forces and their families make for all of us. So as such, would the council look to considering exempting military compensation from the means tests of the benefits that I've listed above? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to say that we were aware of this some time ago and done it. I'll turn to my colleague to the right here, Mark, to answer you.
Thank you, Councillor Law. You'll be pleased to know we already do that. So we are a gold standard council. I was leader at the time when we received the award at the military offices in London for the work we do to look after our service people and families affected by loss from service as well. So actually, when I put forward to the council the local council tax support scheme, it was in there explaining. Now I must admit, when I explain the headlines, which are about pensions and about bereavement payment to widows. But within the documents, I can just find, I think it's 6.3, it does list all the different ways in which we disregard any payment of any kind, as you've outlined. And I know the Royal British Legion had sent to council a similar sort of, lobbying documentation, but we already include that. So we do include payments that come as a result of the service. We disregard those. They are not seen as any income at all to service men and women and to their families. So that is absolutely included. We support our service women and men as much as we can in this council, and that's why we have the Gold Standard Award from the Armed Forces.
Can I thank you for raising the issue? I know you've got a second one, and just add that I think, given the importance of this matter and that other members have been approached, Mark, we've had a brief conversation. I think it'd be helpful if you were to send around a short note to all members just to make that plain. It's good to know that, again, we're doing something that is ahead of our peers, and that's absolutely right, given our nature as a garrison city. No, thank you very much, Jocelyn. Your second subject.
Thank you very much. Yes, I wish to speak to agenda item 11.1, which is the investment in St John's and Highwoods Community Centre. I just want to say how fully supportive I am of the investment in the community centre, how important it is to help improve, repair and maintain the community centre. You know, it's been well used for decades, and it will be great to see it, you know, carrying on for future decades. You know, when I first moved to Colchester, it was one of the first places I went to. I went to the toddler groups there and got to know people. It's at the heart of community. You know, my kids went to the preschool there. You know, and it's got a great dedicated team of staff who are so helpful to everyone in the community. So again, I just want to say that I'm so supportive of the investment. It's really good to know that the community centre will be, you know, well used by residents, you know, for decades to come. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Our next Have Your Say, not able to be present, but on this occasion we'll have it read out, is Councillor Lee Scordis. Lee couldn't make it due to work. Please, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This is a contribution from Councillor Scordis. It's written in terms of a contribution addressed to Councillor Somers. Dear Councillor Somers, as County Councillor for the City Centre, I had wished to attend Cabinet in person regarding this, but work has made this impossible. I want to raise with you the ongoing issue of antisocial behaviour in the city centre, especially after 5 p.m. when street drinkers are causing real distress, and a particularly bad image for Colchester, as they camp outside Robert Dias every day, shouting, swearing and sometimes fighting. I have also seen them during the day sometimes, again deeply damaging to Colchester's reputation. No police officers are visible, and the police say they have no records of this, which suggests we still have real operational issues with the police force. We had this issue a number of years ago, but under the leadership of former Cabinet member Mike Lilly, this was resolved by setting up Team 10 and enforcing the PSPO we still have in place. Since Councillor Lilly left the post, we have sadly gone backwards on ASB and seen the city centre become more unwelcoming. This is bad for businesses and the council. Please can we build up a comprehensive strategy once again to deal with this issue? And that ends the statement, Chair.
Thank you very much. So for Lee, I will respond to him, but for the record, there is no question this great city does have some occasional ASB problems, where they've got to the point of needing action. They've rightly had it. Intervention, St Mary's car park being one recent example. It's taken us a while, but that, to my knowledge, has now been gripped. So that's what we've got to go and do again. I can say that Councillor Somers has picked up on that specific issue herself, has been reporting herself to her police counterparts. But let me take the bigger picture here. So the bigger picture here is it's in everybody's interest that the city centre is a place that you can enjoy without the fear of antisocial behaviour. So this is one possibility that's just been aired. So we're hampered by the pre-election period, but we have started planning work through the Community Safety Partnership to make sure that we're clear on the facts. The trouble with anecdote, it really does reveal a truth of the moment, but it doesn't give you context or volume, doesn't help the planning for what you should do and where resources might go, both, in my view, police resources, but also our own. So we are into that phase of doing some planning to make sure we understand the scope and scale of the challenges and to get a sense of how then to address it. I'm pleased to say, as one illustration of that engagement, that the Chief Exec to my left has been having a conversation with the Deputy Police and Fire and Crime Commissioner just yesterday, I think, Pam, wasn't it? And also with Councillor Liddy, whose deep past involvement is really respected. And there is clearly a cross-party interest in ensuring that the city centre is as attractive a place to visit and to use as possible. So we are on it, but it'll be post-election before we can come out more publicly and say what will be done. But I will drop a line to Councillor Scordis in person. Thank you. Always respect the scribe who's trying to capture the word, the pearls of wisdom as you hope them to be. Right, so that's Councillor Scordis's contribution. I thank him for it. Councillor Naylor, Sarah, please come forward. Feel welcome as ever.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to say I've got a bit of a cold, so I may have a coughing fit. Hopefully that doesn't encroach on the 3 minutes. Excuse the polo, that's the only way of talking. I just want to talk about a matter that's really concerning the opposition. And I do take note that earlier you said everybody must be cognizant of the pre-election period. However, the very fact that 2 portfolio holders have to be absent, I really think is a serious problem for Cabinet of Administration to do its business. So, first of all, I'm wondering, are they merely absent from this meeting, or are they absent from their roles during the pre-election period? And if they are absent from their roles, how is the work being done? And are they receiving their allowances? So that's the first point. And the other consideration about the pre-election period is, and we have raised this, deep concern about some of the items on the agenda today, including State of the Nation housing report. This item really doesn't belong on this agenda, in my opinion. It clearly speaks to national matters, and it ought not to be brought forward. So my point here is, Chair, I'm inviting you to reconsider in your capacity as Chair of the Cabinet whether or not that item ought to be proceeded with this evening. And if, for whatever reason you give, whatever answer, if you could explain your thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Right, so first things first. We didn't call the election, did we? But our business was planned and running, and it's important for the city that we do what we can to continue, which is part of your point, I think, to continue to keep the administration running, to give direction to our officers, and to inform the public perception of both the challenges and our response to them on behalf, and I do say this, I mean it, of all sides of the chamber. So this is usual business. The agenda is usual business. If I thought, and I did say this earlier, if I thought on reading and rereading that what is an important contextual paper for the work that lies ahead, which includes a review of the housing revenue account and how this city will manage its housing stock, if I thought that it was politicised, well, I'll be frank with you, it wouldn't be on the agenda anyway, because that's not how I and we work. Officers write these reports. They obviously get some counsel and tuning from portfolio holders, but I can tell you this is apolitical in its presentation, and the way that we will conduct this meeting as best it can be will be just that. That was the promise I made at the beginning. So I think it is appropriate. It's appropriate that we meet. It's appropriate we continue our business. It's appropriate we provide leadership to the officers, and to extent residents watch these matters to residents as well. So I'm content, and on the advice, I've taken advice from the monitoring officer, that his view, the statutory officer's view, is the same. If it was different, I'll be very clear. If the view was it shouldn't be taken, we wouldn't take it. The absence of the two cabinet members reflects our acceptance of what I've just described, the importance of ensuring there is no conflict of interest, no taking advantage of their position for a political purpose, which is why I was very happy to accept the advice that they should not be present. But to your last point, or your opening one, your last point, which is about their allowances and their business, they are doing their roles. I expect them, therefore, to be taking the allowances that go with doing the job, but they are not here tonight. Thank you.
So to your final point, it's something that I find difficult to square, is that they're deemed that they ought not to be here, but they are still in their positions while campaigning as parliamentary candidates. I think, to me, that doesn't seem right at all. But I'll leave it there. Clearly it's in your gift.
Let me round this off, if I might, Sarah. Again, I would take advice on this, but I see no way in which, having been appointed in the process that takes us through full council, that we can have people hopping in and out of role. That would make no sense. I say it respectfully. Whatever party they will be standing from, they're in the role, they're required, your point's a fair one in that sense, they're required to conduct that role in a professional and appropriate way. To my knowledge, they are. That includes not being here at this time when the general election's been called. Thank you. Our final speaker on General Have Your Say, Melina. Melina, would you bear with me a second? William, what is this item? Is this a general Have Your Say item? Then, Melina, would you wait with just one moment, if you don't mind? William, come forward then, thank you. We had you registered against item 7.1, William.
I see. Probably my fault. Anyhow, thank you for showing flexibility. It is the housing strategy, the wider housing strategy, which is directly addressed by the paper we've got. And I really, you may feel it's factual, and it is factual, but it's the facts that have been chosen, and it's the background of every time we raise any problem with the housing strategy, it's always been central government's fault. And it's always been made in a very political way. And I feel very strongly that the way this is presented is listing all the things that other people have done, and it's blame shifting. It's us not accepting our responsibility to deal with the housing. And we saw at the scrutiny panel, held in secret it had to be, and I can't give any details, but what I can say is that scrutiny panel last month, it was completely clear that our housing strategy doesn't work, that we have a 205 million capital programme that doesn't really work, that the council, that the administration has refused the Conservative amendments to the budget, which would have moderated the amount of spend.
Could I ask you to hold a second? Sorry, William, keep going.
Yes, I'm not going to make any more of the point about it being out of order. What I'm worried about is that we don't have a plan. We don't have a strategy. We have this capital programme review that's been going on for the best part of 2 years now. And it doesn't work. And we have other parties represented in the council, the biggest party represented in the council, that does have ideas on how to deal with housing. And we don't have any opportunity of saying, of communicating what they are. They're not things that can be done in a 3-minute have your say. They're not things that can be done at a scrutiny panel where you're tied down by process and procedure. They are important things. And I hope that you, as a leader who very much takes the position that you take all views on board and so on, I don't feel you are taking them on housing. They're not taking on, your own strategy is bankrupt and won't work. And where there are other views, they're not being heard. And so I want to ask formally and publicly that you convene some type of meeting or convention where all parties, including Labour and the Lib Dems, we'd love to know what Labour have to say about it, and we hear what their ideas are and we try and thrash out a solution to this problem. It is the council's biggest asset. It's the biggest part of our capital programme, and the debt we're building up as we go through this, the modelling is showing that it's going to rise up to 550 million, completely unsustainable. And we have no answers to it except to keep on going, keep on spending, and hope that no one notices. So can we have a clear answer? Will you please have this meeting? Maybe after the election would be more appropriate. We really do need to get to the bottom of this problem collectively.
Thank you, William. Pam, did you still want to say something? So I'll have to go to Pam first. I have got quite a few remarks. I won't make them all, William. I'll talk to you in person, if I might. Pam.
And obviously I'll leave those matters for you, Leader. But the point of order I wanted to make, Councillor Sunnucks, is that this is an officer report written by Philip Sullivan, who is our Chief Executive of CBH and our Strategic Head of Housing. And he nor I are in the business of making political comments in an officer report which comes before Cabinet. So I think it's really important. Philip's perfectly capable of making that point himself, but you may not be with us when he does that. So I really want to make it clear that not just this report, but any officer report comes without any political reference or intonation in relation to national policy. Any statements that are made by any officer about national policy are a matter of fact, not conjecture. Thank you.
Thank you. I would point out, Councillor Sunnucks, that actually the scrutiny panel rejected your arguments and did not agree with what you said. And I certainly refute your proposals as to what you're doing. Now, as portfolio holder, I hold regular meetings with the Labour shadow and the Conservative shadow. They're quite at liberty to put forward any proposals there, because what I'm concerned about is tackling the housing problem that we have in Colchester, the 330 families that are in temporary accommodation, the situation where families in Colchester cannot afford accommodation, they cannot afford to buy, the rental costs keep rising. So I'm very interested to hear any ideas from any quarter as to how we can improve the situation, because I think as this picture that shows in this report makes very clear, particularly in section 472, which refers to the situation in Colchester, the financial positions that people are facing across the country with housing is a serious issue, and one which the new government, whoever they might be, needs to address urgently.
I think just I'll leave the numbers and the observations. I think they've been at least touched on in response, but I want to go to your point about engagement. So there are a number of ways we can do this. So William, as you've been so upfront and bold, then I'll promise you some of my time, and I will do some listening, I promise, and we'll see whether that makes any difference to either of us, but we'll at least have a good conversation. But I wanted to sort of say that the processes by which we have to work also allow for two other things. They allow for, obviously, engagement with the portfolio holder, or if necessary, the leader of the day. But Paul Smith is deeply engaged with this and with the officers. So my suggestion would be pick that up. But I would look to the opposition to do so, if I say it respectfully, consistently. So I would expect the housing lead to be the lead unless that role changes. That's not to say we won't listen to other views, William, but I would start with that. So I believe Councillor Andrew Ellis is your lead, and perhaps we might start with that. But as I say, I'll make myself available. But the Chief Exec has reminded me that if we talk about plans and process, right, we're talking forward 30, 40 years, aren't we? But it starts with a root and branch, facts first, and I am a factual person. We won't be making decisions that don't chime with the facts and best practice elsewhere, guided by our officers. That long process through this year, frustratingly long, but it requires us to understand the condition of our properties, their potential for income, and all the numbers and metrics that go with that, all the possibilities that you've touched on. That's not work done in a day. So that long process will be as cross-party as possible, and it will have built-into engagement with members as well as others. So we have got process, for those who do listen, process and plan ahead, and way ahead, that will do the kind of deep work that is absolutely essential. And at the end of it, decisions that are made will be ones which are sound in my view, and have to be supported by the majority of members, or frankly, it will not fly. The best place to have those conversations is not here, as you've said yourself, around the cabinet table in a 3-minute +1 kind of exchange. So we'll have more of that offline. So I'll stop with that. Thank you. You've got 1 minute for a response, William, if you want to use it, if your parish council meeting allows.
First of all, please can we not have the cabinet playing one member of the shadow cabinet off against the other. I'm the portfolio holder of resources. I'm talking about debt and I'm talking about finance. Councillor Ellis and I are fully in line on this stuff, but I'm talking about what I'm expert in, and which is the debt and the finance. And that's what I'm talking about. That is within my role. Secondly, you say, oh, well, you know, a little conversation here with Councillor Ellis, a little informal chat here and there. That's not the way to deal with the biggest financial problem facing us. It's just not the way to do it. We need a proper meeting, a proper forum, and if the administration won't organise one, then I will raise sponsorship, which I've largely done, and I will try and organise it myself. And I probably won't be until the winter, because I like doing a few other things during the summer. But we have to get there. And just waiting for the capital programme review to complete, we're going to grow old. The suggestion that this is an officer, surely when we get a report presented to Cabinet, the portfolio holder, bears some responsibility for it.
Look, we'll just stop have to stop there. And I know you understand why. Responsibility has to be taken by the Cabinet of the day. If we take a paper, that's absolutely true. But I do respectfully urge you to hear what the Chief Executive said, because it's a real fundamental principle that underpins how this place works. That every member and the public should be able to trust that politics are not colouring what comes forward. And I can only say, I've had a lifetime in the civil service. Here I am, a politician. It's a strange place for me personally to be, but I am. But the papers that come to us are apolitical on the facts as described. Thank you, William, for coming. Give us your time. Right, Melina, I'm so sorry that we've kept you waiting. You know the rules, don't you? So 3 minutes, please, and you need to press that. When you see a red light, you're good to go. You haven't got a red light yet on your... There you are.
Okay. On the 2nd of May, election of councillors took place, and in each ward, the 3 candidates with the most votes got elected. In the council ward, they were all from the Green Party. This means that the suggestions of the Green Party councillors represent 100% the majority of opinions in their ward. According to the democratic procedures, the council decisions therefore need to abide to the suggestions of the Green Party councillors. Have the democratic procedures been followed with regards to my Holy Trinity bid so far? As explained in the audit committee meeting that I last attended, as far as I am concerned, the answer is no. I presented my bid to the full council meeting for the first time. I was encouraged by the portfolio holder, Mrs. Somers, to keep communicating at the last cabinet meeting, and then got an email from Mr. King through the head of the economic growth, dismissing my bid without giving permission to visit the site to provide an exact quote rather than an estimate, according to which, with the existing funding, we could start using the building, especially as a community kitchen. The soup runs that I have been regularly attending have more than not operated in open space under rainy conditions, and people like me in hotels as temporary accommodation still have nowhere to cook. The bid with Community 360, to which Mr. King persists, provides no solution to these issues. There is also an issue with transparency. Mr. King, in the last meeting, the councillors said that they have been told that the cooperation with Community 360 has frozen, but I had received an email saying that the bid is continuing as with the Community 360 and is well ahead. And Property Community 360 is refurbishing the first site. Have you heard the Green councillors about the Holy Trinity bid? No, you have not. They asked that you do not remove the gravestones and that you consider my bid. Have you done this? You ignored them. I am here today to remind you the democratic procedures and to ask that you apply them in reconsideration of my bid in the light of the fact that the Green Party councillors that represent the people of the world and not Mr. King. Please show respect to the people who elected you through democratic procedures and expect you to act according to them.
Okay, thank you. For those listening, we're talking about Holy Trinity Church, yes, correct? Okay. Look.
And democratic procedures.
Yes, thank you, ma'am. Yes, I understand that. So the way these decisions are made in terms of consultation and planning approvals is a committee that represents the whole of the council. This is in no way disrespectful to ward members of Castle or any other part of the city. They have the right and they exercise it, and in my view, they absolutely should, to make sure that local views are heard. But the decisions made about renovation, because there's several subjects in here, so the democracy pieces, that's how we work. Yes, we do elect members for a ward, but some decisions are made by members across the city because there's a city-wide interest in great places like Holy Trinity Church and the square around it, as elsewhere. So to the extent that we have members' views, that's the democratic process. So it has been followed. It may not feel that way to you, but it has been. Representations are made, listened to, a process, a consultation leads to a decision. That's that. In terms of Community 360, that's not a subject we're going to talk about here. You'll be well aware there are conversations between Community 360 and their partners, including this council, going on. I'm not involved in that. I have no particular angle or axe to grind about Holy Trinity Church. I would want to see that repaired, restored, used well. That's perhaps my last point, and we have made this before, I think, here and elsewhere. There's several years' worth of work, fundraising, before that great building is fully in the condition that we would want it to be. And in that time frame, points about who might use it or not will get confirmed. That's not for now. I know, I saw some of the exchanges, there was a real respect genuinely for your wish to help other people. I've not been involved in that. I wouldn't expect to be. I guess that's all I can say. Thank you for bringing your issue, and if you wish to reply, then you have a minute to do so. Thank you.
Mr. King, I am very sorry to say that from my experience in the councils and the communications with you, you do not seem to be honest. You are saying you have nothing to do with regards to the decision from the Community 360. The portfolio, Mrs. Somers said, please keep communicating with us. And you said through your head of the finance, please, we thank you for your interest, but we are going to continue with Community 360. It was your personal decision. So how are you saying now, I have nothing to do with this? Thank you.
Thank you for your views. That marks the end of General Have Your Say. We will go on to item 7.1, which is Housing State of the Nation. Councillor Sunnox has had his say and gone. Councillor Tim Young. Tim. Saying you don't do politics at all, Tim, so I'll hand it over to you on that basis.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will keep my remarks to the what's in the report, because I think that's important, but it is in the report. And I have to disagree with you and the Chief Executive. It is a political report. The Council is a political organisation, therefore it has to have a political bent to it. It isn't party political. That's the point. It's impartial, and every officer report I've seen in this council over my 32 plus years on the council have always been impartial, and that is the way we do it, and every other local authority in the country. It's any suggestion otherwise is unacceptable. Anyway, to the report, which I thought was very good, very interesting. Just a couple of aspects I want to highlight. One is in 4.1, the Renters Reform Bill, which I think many of us were disappointed that it ran out of parliamentary time, but is important. No fault evictions, I think, has cross-party support, and it needs to be brought back as soon as possible when the new Parliament convenes after the 4th of July. And maybe as a council you would think about, as a cabinet, you would think about writing to our 3 MPs, whomsoever they may be, after the 4th of July, to encourage them to support no-fault evictions and getting this back on the parliamentary agenda as soon as possible, because I think it's very, very important indeed. I think the private rented sector has some of the best and some of the worst conditions in Colchester, and we need to do something about the private rented sector. As somebody who does rent in the private rented sector with a very good landlady, I'm at the best of it, but we know some of the situations are very poor, and it is the worst. At least, however good we think Colchester Borough Homes and other registered providers are in the city, at least we have some comeback when things go wrong with them. We do have some influence, certainly over CBH and certainly over the housing associations with private renters. Although our private sector housing team do a great job, it isn't so easy because they're not always easy to contact. So yeah, more to do on that. So I thought that bit was very interesting. The Labour group had a debate about temporary accommodation. And I know Councillor Smith takes this very seriously indeed, but some of the temporary accommodation in Colchester is inappropriate, it's unsuitable, and I think at the margins of the law. Councillor Warnes, you know, is a housing professional, and he certainly had some very strong things to say about this. Now, we have to use temporary accommodation. I know Councillor Smith and the Cabinet would want not to use it as little as possible because it's expensive and it doesn't meet the needs, and all sorts of problems arise in temporary accommodation. If it's out of the city, then you have problems with transport, problems with education for the children, and it isn't a good way of dealing with a major problem. And they've got a housing crisis, as Councillor Smith said earlier. We have to deal with it, we have to deal with it, and we hope any new government will have it high on its agenda. So we want to see some action, both on the private rented sector and on temporary accommodation. I know Colchester Homes are doing their very, very best in dealing with these huge, important and serious issues. But perhaps Councillor Smith and others would be able to highlight what has been done already and what this administration wants to do in the future to deal with, I think, some of the biggest problems that we have in Colchester, because we have to deal with this housing crisis. It's been going on for a long time, and anything we can do to influence national policy, we should do. Hopefully, as much as we can on a cross-party basis, but the Labour group will certainly support any suggestions or positive contributions that are made by the Cabinet to influence any improvements in these areas. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tim. That's very thoughtful and helpful. I take your first 2 points too, both in terms of presentation and your support for the impartiality of the documentation, which you know was the point we were trying to make. I also, before I pass to Councillor Smith, say absolutely I get the lobbying point. Now, we have done this before. I've done this personally, in person, and you know, it does help working with your partners across North Essex and wider. We absolutely have to catch hold of attention. So I can say to you, yes, there's a great reminder of the lobbying possibilities and the fact that a new government, whoever they might be, is a new opportunity to influence national policy that shapes what we can or can't do. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Smith. Paul.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Councillor Tim Young for his contributions there. He's absolutely right that the loss of the Section 21 no-fault evictions was very unfortunate, and it's very sad that the government chose not to prioritise that bit of legislation over some others. As a ward councillor, I know the heartache that the Section 21 evictions particularly cause to families, and the situation is extremely difficult. Turning now to the report, and again, I welcome the comments that have been made about it being non-party political. Had I attempted to make this report party political, I'm quite sure the monitoring officer would be having very severe words with me, and I do find it strange that people make those suggestions in a public forum. Also, dealing with Councillor Naylor's points, this is focused on Colchester. The various sections of the report describe what the national issues are and then say what the situation is in Colchester. So in section 4.72, for example, we refer to 319 families who are in temporary accommodation. I regret to say that's no longer the case. The figure as of the 4th of June is 335, a significant increase. There's a further 10 MOD properties that we are going to have to hand back in the very near future. That's likely to increase that figure by even more. Of those 335 families, unfortunately, exactly 100 of them are in bed and breakfast, accommodation and lodgings, precisely the accommodation that Councillor Young describes. Sadly, 31 of those are not in Colchester. It is a really difficult decision for a family to have to make. Do they accept a very poor quality accommodation in Colchester or slightly better accommodation elsewhere with the impact that has on schooling, work and what have you? It's a terrible situation and one which we need to address. And I find it difficult when we've had at Essex University in February a summit. There was attended not just by councillors from Colchester, but from, I think, 9 other local authorities across Essex. And it was cross-party from Colchester Council. There were Labour councillors present, Liberal Democrat councillors and Conservative councillors present. But it's strange that this information doesn't seem to have got back to some members of the Conservative group. That was a detailed discussion of the problems and looking at the way forward. So the suggestion that we have another summit seems a very strange one to me, because we know what the problem is and we need to work on the solutions, and the solutions are increasingly difficult. Because as it quite clearly sets out in the report, in section 4.9 amongst others, the financial situation that the providers of social housing are facing nationally is extremely difficult. Many social housing providers are no longer taking up new developments. What that means is that accommodation that would be provided to reduce the 335 families in temporary accommodation is not available. That is the difficulty we face. And when we look at a solution to just take a mathematical equation of projected interest rates is not the only way forward. There are other calculations apart from the pounds, shillings and pence. And by doing that, I A, show my age, and B, show my training as a banker. But what we need to do is to get to a position where families in Colchester can get decent accommodation in Colchester. And this is what we are seeking to do. And we are very open to any advice, help or suggestions from any party, be it Labour, Conservative, Green, or even the Reform Party, if they have something to say on this subject, because we need a solution to this problem. And if someone gave me that solution, I would accept it wholeheartedly. But we have a very difficult problem here. There are a lot of big issues, and I just commend it to all of you to look closely at what we can do collegiately to solve this problem.
Thank you, Paul. Tim, would a final remark from you before you go?
I think that's very encouraging, and we will certainly, as the Labour Group and Councillor Rippingale, as the shadow, will work with you, because this is a problem that crosses party boundaries and is not one that is insurmountable. We have won awards for tackling homelessness in the past. I'm sure we can do it again, and a bit of innovation and thought putting into it, and I got good reports back from the housing summit that you mentioned. Let's work together to solve this crisis.
Thank you very much. Cabinet, if no other remarks, I think it's been given a very good airing, both in have your say, which is appropriate, but here around this table in the last 5 or 10 minutes. So this is an excellent report. I also commend it to you. We confirm our content.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. In which case we go on to the council productivity plan, which is down myself to offer a few remarks on. I don't want to take more of your time than necessary, but what's in here and what lies behind it is really fundamental. So the government have quite reasonably said they expect local authorities to provide an open accounting of how they work, in effect, how efficient and effective they are, and to take responsibility, which goes back to our earlier conversations, take responsibility for where they are to the extent that they can. What we have here in this report is an acknowledgement of that obligation laid upon us, and at the heart of it, a way of addressing the government's requirements by turning attention to and debated on more than one occasion in real depth the Fit for the Future change programme that will drive us towards the sustainable financial position that we need to be in as a local authority. I'm opening this up for any comments or observations from anybody else, but if not, I would commend to you. I will commend to you after listening to, have your say speakers, he says, of which, Paul, you were hiding at the back. The opposition leader, Paul Dundas. Paul, come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Leader. Thank you. I'm not going to go through this whole report because it's too extensive to do in the time available. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things I noted on it. Firstly, there's a report in there on the waste programme, Environment Stream Waste Programme. And it says in there, key milestones, March 2024, draft waste strategy to Colchester at Environment and Sustainability Panel. Now, I was on that in March 2024, and I don't remember discussing it at all. In fact, I've looked back and it hasn't been discussed at the ENS panel since March 2023. And actually, I don't believe anything's happened in terms of any reports or any progress from Ricardo, the consultants. I think the last thing was probably in autumn 23, being generous. It's been deferred to every meeting because no report has been available. It then goes on to say that summer 2024 public consultation on waste strategy. I think summer officially started on Saturday, so I assume that will be coming any day now, but I'm just not sure it's factually correct on where we are with the waste review. So I think there are some errors in there. It's just not true, I'm afraid. The other thing I was going to pick up on, if I may, is there's some talk in there about the assets programme. Now, I appreciate this relates mainly to a number of our existing assets and how we manage them, and I know you're discussing one of them this evening. But it says in there about new capital programmes or projects, and that they need to have a business plan and they need to be considered as part of their value. And I was thinking back to one we've much discussed, and I don't want to go over it all again, but you know my view on some of the capital programmes, particularly around the traffic lights. I won't call it what Councillor Goss calls it, but the 7.7 million highway works which were authorised at Cabinet. And I'd just like to remind the panel, I won't mention the exact figures because they were in a confidential section, but there were a lot of caveats around the valuations. And there was a risk in there, and it was highly implied, that the end value of the asset could be less than the money you're potentially spending on it. Now, I'm not sure how that fits in with the statement you put in this report around value of capital investments. Furthermore, it states there should be a business plan. Now, you may well have a vast business plan for the end of that site, which the works contribute towards, but I certainly haven't seen it yet. So again, if you follow your own report, you're apparently approving tonight, you shouldn't proceed with it until you've actually got a business plan in place. So yeah, my comment would be, if you're going to approve this tonight, then you need to actually follow it, not just approve it and then ignore it when it suits you.
Thank you, Paul. Very succinctly put.
Less than 5 minutes.
Well inside, I admire that. The mothers push up to the boundary. I might too. Thank you for the observations. They are right, I think, from what I understand. I would just say to you, and you'll know this, that this is by its nature a document that's a snapshot in time. And the whole way in which we proceeded on this, in passing Fit for the Future, was, frankly, in the round. That what we would have is a forward and strategic plan, set out how it would work. We would share the challenges with yourself and other colleagues. We will be gathering together because it's the way that we work, I think, at our best in the chamber. We would ensure that we have the insights shared, the challenges shared, but of course held by the administration of the day, a position you've had before, which of course cuts across some of these projects, at least in terms of a brief moment in time. Now, the ball is very firmly, absolutely accepted, resting with us, and it's our job in a way that is as collegiate as possible to sort of carry through what I know you do accept is the need for significant change, which has an efficiency and effectiveness and a balance to strike. It doesn't stop investment, but takes a measured decision as best we can as we proceed. So we will come back to you on the specifics, but I would just sort of say this was, and it's clear, I think, from the documentation, that snapshot. And the next one will have to be clear about what has not been achieved at that time, when it might be if it hasn't been. But I absolutely, I understand the points that you make, and my response is very much in terms of accepting the challenge and, as I say, continuing in the way that we're set out. I would just pick up the one specific observation that you made around, they mentioned around a certain set of traffic lights in North Colchester. Because it can be lost sight of, that the 7.7 million relates to mandated highways investments that we must make, for which we have had, if I understand it, £5 million as a related contribution. So this has to go through for any form of development of Colchester Northern Gateway South. Now on that, I know work is well advanced, and I do look forward to, and the Deputy Chief Exec's not here tonight, just to ask me how to share that soon. I'm as interested as anybody else is, and you will be too, to extract the maximum advantage from that site and to continue those conversations that we've had elsewhere before the new political season was interrupted. Thank you very much.
Just come back very briefly. I won't go about the set of traffic lights. I think we know our views on that. I was just going to pick up on the waste service, though. I'm not quite sure where we are with Ricardo on this. It does seem to have really dragged on. And it's something which actually there's a lot of public interest in, because I keep getting asked about what's happening with waste. The reports got deferred time and time again last year at the Environment and Sustainability. It was sort of like waiting for Godot rather than waste service, This is getting quite urgent. So I just don't know what's happening. So all I can do is urge you to follow up where we are and when that report's actually going to be forthcoming, really.
I'll ask the Chief Exec if she can say something more, but as I say, Paul deserves a response.
Yes, a comprehensive response. Paul, thank you for pointing out any inaccuracies in the report. I'll certainly pick them up and correct them. But with regard to the next stage of information sharing, on the 19th of June, the whole of the senior leadership team is coming together to have a look at where waste and greening, what the current position is on that. And there have been a number of challenges. You've alluded to some of those tonight. As soon as the election is over, a summary of that insight piece will be going to the leadership team so that they can have a look at what the position is. And if there are any variances, and I suspect there might be, then we'll be looking at those in terms of mitigation impacts and how we remedy it. But although it goes back to the point that Councillor Nolan made before, although Councillor Goss is not here tonight, we are in constant engagement with him over the waste strategy. So thank you for pointing it out. And I'll make sure that the Cabinet has the information they need to share with you as and when. Thanks.
Mark.
Just on that, Councillor Dunners and well, I wanted to just say, I believe there are two factors that have caused further delay. One is the government consultation on waste and how to deal with it. So we didn't want to go ahead and make too many changes until, I mean, it's one thing I think government was trying to get a grip of, and it would be really useful to have a standardised set of waste collections. Clearly, the election will change the final outcomes of that. We have also noted at our cabinet here the Essex Waste Strategy as well. So I believe that it was the sort of governmental change, the Essex Waste Strategy that we are waiting for. And then the one other point is that we have also focused on the rollout of the garden waste scheme as well. So I believe that those things did cause further delays. We're still waiting to be absolutely clear to not misstep what government advice would be, but that has at least solidified, but now we've got the election that may change under a new government.
Thank you, Paul. I hope you heard that, and that's okay, at least understandable. I mean, the election process, I have to say, has not been helpful to getting people together. And stop at that. Sarah, Councillor Naylor, you're down on this item. Did you want to come forward? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Croaking away still. With regard to appointments to outside bodies and council groups, I was having a look at the supplementary agenda that came through yesterday, I think it was, or earlier today. And what struck me was that I think actually I'm right in saying that these positions are in the gift of the leader. Is that right? Leader of administration.
Sorry, are you planning to speak on the next item, which is 8.2? Because I do noted down against the productivity plan.
No, I'm not. No, 8.2
right,
is the one I'm notifying.
Feel free to stay there rather than have you hop up and down. That's down to us.
No, I'm happy to come back. Don't worry.
All right. Okay. Thank you. Then we'll just finish this item then, Sarah. Thank you very much, and my apologies, and then we'll ask you to come forward again. All right. So, colleagues, right to acknowledge, just to sort of pull this together, the sheer scale and challenge of what the council is seeking to do. Thank you, Mark. Kamal, I've got one more speaker, I notice. Our notes are doing very well. There you are. Come on through. We will get there, and that's absolutely fine. Please. We love a bit of movement and energy around the chamber. You understand the process, and so you have up to five minutes if that's required.
Thank you. Dear members of the Cabinet, according to the latest Waste Services Programme and Garden Waste Scheme, with the newly introduced Garden Waste Service, the net revenue of 2024-2025 increased by nearly £1 million. It is forecasted that between 2025 and 2026, the net revenue will further increase by another £103,000. In addition to generating this huge income, the council also reduced its garden waste service trucks and crews. The number has been reduced from 5.25 to 3. As a new councillor, I am a bit concerned that this measure, which I understand was introduced to save some money, is now being seen as a chicken producing golden eggs. And the council's desire for golden eggs is causing it to abandon its climate and biodiversity outlook. 2 weeks ago, I was contacted by a resident living around Manor Road expressing her disappointment that the council cut down the greenery and the grass in her area, and that she believed that our council supported No Mow May, giving at least our insects a fighting chance. Similar to Manor Road, I also noticed other areas being cut, including extensive areas around St Andrews Avenue, East Hill Park and Castle Park, and certain areas and riverbanks around Roos Way. Last week, I met with the officer responsible for parks, countryside and greening and inquired about cuts I observed and asked about the status of the normal May that the council previously adopted. Unfortunately, I was informed that officers received an increased number of complaints and inquiries last May and that they advised the cabinet not to have normal May this year. Yesterday, I was further surprised when council paid and sponsored garden waste collection advertisement appeared on my Facebook page using images of wildflowers and portraying them as weeds with the title "Keep Weeds Under Control." Both myself as well as my residents are gravely concerned that council's discovery of this golden egg-laying hen, the garden waste tax, and the huge amount of money generated is encouraging some to choose the easy way of abandoning Momo Way as people start seeing wildflowers as weeds, and not only that, but also feed and benefit from the public prejudice and use it as a ground to encourage residents to sign up this scheme, which became extremely profitable for the council. Our council created Woodland and the Biodiversity Project to promote wildlife and respond to climate crisis. Our council also declared a climate emergency. I genuinely believe our council should abide by climate and environmental policies and seek ways to further advance our climate and environmental credentials by discussing developing pollinator strategy rather than abandoning promotion and protection of wildlife. A plan fit for the future for the young generations should promote and protect wildlife rather than continue portraying them as annoying pests and weeds that need to be taken care of courtesy of £1 million. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a number of issues entwined there, growing well, I think, and hopefully looking pretty. Look, to the heart of this, the use of different images and shorthand in Facebook, well, it wouldn't be the first or the last time that one hasn't hit that exactly on the button, any of us here, or others, but we actually have a great comms team and they mostly do. So look, the policy position that I understand, subject to the views of colleagues, and we'll cross-check and come back to you on some of the specifics you've raised, is absolutely, and we've shown this, to want to be at the forefront of those things that we can do, such as No Mow May. And it's fascinating for me that there was a lot of resistance at the beginning, but now it's turned, and absolutely rightly, towards seeing the value and the ways you've described of keeping space for nature, at least in that early time of the year when pollinators and others are most likely to get nourishment from what nature can provide if we leave enough of it alone. So we are in exactly the right place. We do have to, however, do what we can to raise funds as well as reduce spend elsewhere for reasons that you will understand, because we can do less elsewhere in every service, including those that address environmental and sustainability issues with which you and many of us have a similar passion. So I'd ask you to I'd like the analogy, but this is a hen that we want to look after. It's in everybody's interest that we do. We are absolutely devoted to doing what circumstances allow us to do to look after our city and to address where we're able to, again, practically, the climate emergency, the biodiversity challenges that, unfortunately, the country as a whole is afflicted by, and which Colchester is trying where it can to address. But there are some specifics there which we'll come back to you in person later on. Thank you. Smith.
Sorry, I would also just point out, actually, the Green Waste Service doesn't actually make money. What you're seeing there is the reduction in the cost of the service. So the total amount that we're getting in charges is less than what it actually costs us to provide the service. So it's not actually a hen that's laying a golden egg, it's a hen that's eating slightly less corn than it used to.
Other analogies are available. Mark Gorey, thank you, Paul.
Thank you. And I think some of the points you make are absolutely fair and we can take on board, and the leader sort of has intimated that. But I will say that, again, back when I was leader and since then, we have made substantial changes in the right direction. I'm passionate about the future of this planet, of our country, of our city, and protecting as much as we can and finding the balance. One of the reports on the papers tonight is about Ferry Marsh, and you heard Councillor Luxford Vaughan responding to a resident. That is us taking the side of biodiversity. That is us taking the side of protecting nature over human habits. So on most of our agendas, there are examples of us doing that, but I can absolutely take the points you're making. In order to run that service, and as Councillor Smith says, to run that service, to provide it to residents in the way we are now doing it, is saving the council money, and that allows us then to invest in other schemes, other greener schemes. You were very much involved at the time when I was leader in banning glyphosate chemicals. That has meant we had to look at the contract and had to look at ways that it may cost us more not to just simply spray weed killer. So in each case, there is a balance of protecting the environment and looking at the costs. Now, I'm absolutely a believer that a lot of environmental policies will save money and save the planet at the same time, and we need to convince more of our politicians and the public of that. What I wanted to say is that No Mow May should be followed in most areas. I think there have been controversial areas where there have been complaints. We have to take the balance of bringing people with us. The more people we can bring with us, the better, and we need to win those arguments. Sometimes, in some examples, we can't win the argument, or for some reason the verges, particularly to do with sight lines for traffic, is important and we have to cut them. I think a pollinator strategy is a good one, going just beyond doing less mowing, but actually looking at encouraging. So I think that's something we can take forward. We can take it to the Environment and Sustainability Panel. Again, something that was introduced when I was leader to ensure that we not only speak about a climate and biodiversity crisis, but we implement change, we implement a plan, and we implement initiatives. So we're doing a number of those initiatives and we're following that plan. The one last thing I'd say is, as part of the greening, the garden waste strategy, we have talked a lot about composting. We need to go further in that because the council was offering grants to do community composting. I don't think we've had enough examples of that being taken up, but I also believe the council needs to go further in advertising that as well. So your point's accepted, but hopefully you understand some of the points I'm trying to make about the balance. And I believe we are in the better balance of supporting climate action and biodiversity encouragement. Thank you.
Kamal, you have the option of a minute response if required.
Thank you. If possible, I would like to request Council to declare how much money was spent on the latest garden waste advertisement on Facebook. Office's report on increased complaint received from the residents, and if possible, instruct Environment and Sustainability Panel to review and come up with recommendations to change public attitude towards wildlife and scrutinize litter warriors weed pickers leg, because as far as I'm aware, weed pickers leg isn't properly organized, supported or educated to remove weeds that may actually pose a risk in the around pavements. And unfortunately, I do share Councillor Dundas's disappointment with the performance of the former Environment and Sustainability Panel. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have a look and see what we can do with those points. We will know what we're spending on advertisements, but I don't want to get into a blow-by-blow how much is raised, because they will know that also, but we perhaps give some illustrations of what we spend, but it is in the context described. Have to raise income, we have to communicate what we do, and that alone would be a value. But thank you very much for your attendance and remarks. Right. I had to note Councillor Smith had another obligation, has had to leave us for the time being. Cabinet colleagues like to draw a close to the discussion around the council productivity plan. So bringing together the strands of discussion that we've had, what the paper sets out and includes, although it's a snapshot in time to be updated, is a fundamental change programme is essential if we are to balance the books in a way that has wider support both across the chamber and beyond. It's comprehensive and difficult work. I asked us to be braced for the fact that some things will be done to time, some things will. We've just heard an example, do rather better than caution suggested some months ago. Others are going to be difficult to deliver. We knew that. It's a 3-year approach, and some key moments along the way will be difficult. The plans and the delivery will shift and move, and that is not anything other than just practical business, but we have to be committed to this. It's the heart of our response to government, but it's at the heart of us getting the council, as it says on the tin, fit for purpose. Ask us that we accept the recommendation.
Accepted, agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you, in which case we can safely go on to appointments to outside bodies and council groups.
Sorry, can I just inform Cabinet you have been going for 90 minutes and under the new rules you are required to consider to have a break at this point, Chair.
Okay. Can I ask for a view of Cabinet? Do you want a break? Right, we'll stop for 10 minutes, leg stretch, come back if we can, just after 1:45 and press on. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, let's start again. Our next item is appointments to outside bodies and council groups. Sarah, I think you wanted to come forward and say something before we get into this.
I have another go. So with the supplementary agenda setting out the appointments to the various outside bodies and council groups, I was having a good look through it, and I think I'm right in saying that it's in the leader's gift, the administration's gift, how these are allocated. And I know that you have a great deal of pride and you're keen to include members from across the chamber in the work you do. So I was very surprised to see that almost all of those seats, in fact all of the permanent ones, have been shared out between the two parties which are second largest. And the largest party, which is the Conservative Party, haven't got any seats at any of these outside bodies and council groups. So that's my first observation. So I'm wondering about your view on that and how you arrive at the decision to appoint to those outside bodies and council groups, and what you might do to redress the balance. So one of them, North East Essex Economic Board, doesn't appear to have a substitute, which may be the case. So, for example, as a small token of an acknowledgement of my point, it's an area I have a particular interest in, and I'd be very happy to be a substitute for that particular board. But that's kind of by the by, really, because actually voters have voted for the Conservatives to have the most councillors on the council, and yet, as I've said, we're excluded in appointments to outside bodies and council groups, which again, returning to my earlier theme, doesn't seem right.
Thank you. I was waiting for your red light to go off, and you can come back, obviously, in a moment. Look, I follow the conventions, if I'm frank, and it would be no different than when the last Conservative administration was here. That given that many of these roles are representational, in the sense that the administration is responsible for policy and delivery of business, then I'm not saying it's true for absolutely everyone, but certainly for many of those appointments, there is a logic for having a member of the administration who has a responsibility for the delivery of business, representing the council on those bodies. That really is the heart of it. There have been occasions in the past, and some have been at this game a lot longer than me, where we've adjusted that because of a particular expertise of a particular person. And I'm absolutely open always to that. I hear your as an example, suggestion, and I'll have a look at that away from this place. But that's simply it. So responsible, therefore we have to, and you will understand that this is sometimes a challenge. We have to man up, woman up, represent the administration on those bodies so that there is a consistency between what we say, what we do, and how we represent it to partners, and to avoid the challenge that can come if you have this across party lines. So the opportunity to open the door to members of the opposition is the same as when the last Conservative administration was in place. It is limited, but as I say, I am open and I'll take on board what you've said. Thanks.
Thank you, David, Chair, rather. I think I'm right in saying there's quite a few Labour members who've been appointed to things, and I'm just curious about how that ties up with your point about it needing to be the administration, because as we all know, the administration is a minority administration of the Liberal Democrats, and Labour will have us believe that they have no involvement in it. apart from a kind of supply and confidence arrangement at times. So that doesn't seem to square off to my mind. And I will just leave the point that I note that the largest group of councillors have been excluded from outside bodies and council groups. Whatever your point about policy, it seems wrong. Thank you.
Thank you. Just on the Labour point, I'll go back to the realities. You will understand that an administration of the day at any time has to have the command and consent of the chamber for obvious reasons, or it cannot function more than but a moment. So we do have the command and consent of the chamber. We have the active support. It's not a formal coalition. That's true, and you described it in the way you have. So that's why acting as if in coalition would be my choice of words, and for that reason, acting that way obliges us to follow through in appointments. But I don't want to repeat what I said no more than you will yours. Thank you. Right, let's go on to the substance of the item. Richard, this keeps, for those listening, this can keep shifting and moving, so appointments.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just wanted to update Cabinet on a couple of further appointments that have come forward pursuant to the publication of the supplementary agenda. We've had the nominations now through from the Green Group. So on the Member Development Group, Councillor Goetcher will be appointed, and for the Local Highway Panel will be Councillor Chuffaloo. And then on the Police and Crime Panel, the substitute member for that will be Councillor Lilly rather than Councillor Harris as specified. Otherwise, it's as per the schedule, Chair.
Thank you. Colleagues, you have the paper and the recommended decisions set out there between 2.1 and 2.5 on the basis of the amendments tabled and circulated and the additional changes that have just been noted by Mr. Clifford. Are we content? Content. Thank you. Next item is Fleet Transition Strategy. And Councillor Dundas, I think you wanted to come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Just actually, before I start, I'm just going to pick up on going back to the last item. Actually, when I was Leader, I did appoint, I think, at least one, possibly two Liberal Democrats to external bodies. Good man. So, you know, cross-party, when you're in a minority, is perhaps a good idea on some of these things. But to the matter in hand, on this item, obviously, it's a shame the portfolio holder isn't here. I'm not going to go over the reasons why. We've discussed it. But I think when a portfolio holder isn't here, when the subject matter comes up, you know, ideally they probably should, if it can be deferred to the next meeting. It's not good practice, I think we can all agree, to have items on the Cabinet agenda when the portfolio holder can't attend. And I know, you know, I read in the press how much the Lib Dems like spending time together. So, you know, why wouldn't they be? But anyway, serious matter. I was actually on the ENS committee when this was discussed, and there is a recommendation from the ENS committee to Cabinet to slightly alter the strategy. And I just wanted to explain the rationale behind it. In actual fact, I think I was sitting with Councillor Corbyn on the committee, and we discussed it there and then. And I think it came about because a lot of the technology, particularly in the transition to new power sources, electric vehicles and that, it's not always immediately apparent where it comes from. And all the committee was saying was look carefully at what you're buying and actually research who you are buying it from rather than just relying on the badge on front. You know, to use an example, I don't want to pick on them because they're a good company, whatever, but if you buy a new MG car, perfectly good cars, very good value, etc. But you need to know you're not buying a car from a classic British sports car manufacturer. What you're actually doing is buying a car designed and made entirely in China by a company based in Shanghai, 63% owned by the Chinese government. And the same applies to a lot of commercial vehicles, which might have a UK or European badge on the front or be marketed under that auspices, but actually they're not in the least bit European. So it doesn't mean don't buy them, but at least find out and know what you're buying before you make the decision. And that was the point the committee were trying to get across. And, you know, if we're talking about a climate emergency, there's no point in buying something which makes us feel good locally and improves things just in our little area, if by doing so, we are encouraging or promoting an environmental disaster somewhere else in the world. Because a climate emergency doesn't have convenient little political boundaries like a map we look at in the Atlas. It's one planet, okay? And we sometimes get bogged down into thinking that, oh, if we do our stuff locally, we're all good and fine, it'll solve us, our temperatures won't go up. But actually, that's irrelevant. It's what happens worldwide which matters. So I would commend the recommendation from Environment and Sustainability to you. I hope you accept it. I won't go through the rest of the fleet strategy. That's for the portfolio holder to do, but please accept that recommendation.
Thank you. Before I move on to the report, anybody who would like to speak to this? Mark?
Yeah, it's nice to agree. I was on that panel, as Councillor Dundas said, and received this report. I think this is a really decent sort of explanation of what the service are doing, and I felt confident in the responses the service were giving. The extra note, the extra due regard to be given, I think has just been explained by Councillor Dundas pretty well. So I think we should continue supporting that. It also addresses some of the concerns mentioned earlier by other councillors on the productivity plan. So I'm happy to accept the report and the additional comment from the Environment and Sustainability panel. It's received well at the panel, and comments that Councillor Dundas has summarised were also agreed upon.
Thank you very much, and Paul, I add my thanks too, because we have to have a thoughtfulness about this, and you said it very well about how to remember how narrowly people can look at these issues. The truth of the matter is that any form of industrial production of any kind has a harmful, it would seem to me to have a harmful effect, and we're trading one versus another. So thoughtfulness in what we do, where we buy, how we buy, when we buy, has to be just that, and you explained that very well. In terms of the portfolio holder, he's of course supportive of the paper in his name. You expect me to say that, but it is the case. And my personal view on this was, if this was more contentious, then I would have wanted this pulled. But it's not contentious for the reasons that you've described so well, and the short history set out in the executive summary says that. So for over 3 years, we've had a direction and heading with cross-party support, as described in the paper, and the latest meeting of the Environment and Sustainability panel cross-parties put forward a recommendation which I know the portfolio holder supports, and I certainly do too. So for those reasons, I gently say it's appropriate. If it was more contentious or partisan, that would be a different matter, and we would deal with it differently. So, thank you. Can I just ask Cabinet colleagues, are we agreeing to support and accept the recommendations?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you, and thank you, Paul, for attending.
Thank you, Leader. Yes, just to add, I think we always have to remember, when you're quite right about the manufacture of things has an environmental impact, and we have to remember that not all places in the world have the same environmental and health and safety standards as we might have in the UK and Europe, which we have to bear in mind.
Thank you. We go to item 10.1, Ferry Marsh Nature Reserve improvements. And I'll turn to Councillor Andrea Luxford-Vaughan.
I don't really have anything to add apart from what's already in the papers. Yeah. It's quite a comprehensive report.
Yeah.
I think the contentious issue when it was discussed at ENS was this issue about the covenant and whether or not, as a public open space, it it was permissible to close the path. I think we've established, although legal opinion, in my opinion, was quite complicated, officers have backed that up with a verbal update to us that what we're doing is okay. So I think we should accept the proposal.
Thank you. I'll take remarks from any member. I agree the paper is very clear. It had a good airing earlier when Professor Black offered a personal view, a repeat of what she'd actually put to the committee. So it's covered by the two papers in front of us for those listening, which is the recommendations for the Environment and Sustainability Panel meeting, which I know Councillor Corey Markey were at, as well as the paper itself. So to you. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank Councillor Luxford Vaughan for her work and support on this, and for Fiona Shipp for picking this up over the last sort of 18 months that she's been with the council. And actually thank Professor Black as well for her thoughts. I know that Andrea works a lot with Professor Black, Jane Black in Wivenhoe. She does a lot of good work, whether with the Wivenhoe Society or on issues to do with local plan issues with Wivenhoe. So I know she is keen on protecting and preserving as much as possible for our community in Wivenhoe. I have worked on this for a number of years to ensure that we have a balance of this site being protected and not flooded too much. Andrea mentioned earlier the substantial effects upon the Wivenhoe Trail that the flooding caused, and we were concerned about losing the trail and the structural integrity of that. So there's a number of factors involved in this, and the first paper we passed, and it came to Cabinet earlier in the year, was to extend the sluice and to ensure the management of the water levels was going to be something that could be controlled for a balance of wildlife and human aspects. And this is the follow-up about the management of the site overall. So what I would just state is we had consultation online and in person. Lots of Wivenhoe residents took part in getting their views heard on this, and it was made fairly clear about what we wanted to achieve there. And I do see that, and it is in the paper, the overwhelming support was to support the growing biodiversity of that site, to ensure the water levels were controlled, and if needs be, that some access will be restricted in regards to promoting biodiversity. So therefore, the residents and the consultation responses do back that position. I do fully understand where Jane Black is coming from. We want to ensure that our residents in Wivenhoe enjoy that site as best as possible. But as referred to earlier, we need to find that balance in favour of nature and biodiversity. Our world is burning, and we need to locally and globally do our part, and this is one step in that direction.
Thank you very much, both of you. There is a great couple of sentences in the Environment Sustainability report which struck me, which was to the effect that this is not about a loss of Ferry Marsh, but rather a fantastic nature reserve has been gained, and that seems to me to be right, reading the papers and listening to the balance of opinion here. We should be proud of this. If you go up, and some of you will, and there are points above Colchester that you can get a good view of the whole horizon. We are still blessed with lots of green space, and it's the best thing about a city that has grown from a town, that you can keep the best of those green open spaces, whereas a big industrial city just can't do that. That opportunity is being lost. So we've got a lot to love about the city we have, and this is one more example. So I thank you to you both, what you've been doing locally and with colleagues like Professor Black and the panel itself. So we go to 2.1, and do we agree to approve the changes? Thank you very much. Okay. Next item is the St John's and Highwoods Community Centre. We've heard from Councillor Law. Councillor Jay has declared an interest and will step away from the table. And we'll go to the paper, which I'll briefly summarise. As described, an investment in St John's and Highwoods Community Centre is a much loved place that needs some TLC and investment to ensure that it has a sustainable longer term future. As described in the paper, this is an investment to a degree in lieu of alternative plans for investment in North Colchester, mindful of other provision as well as the costs and the state of development of Colchester Northern Gateway South. So the paper is clear, there's a lengthy executive summary. Are there any further observations to those that have already been made by Councillor Law elsewhere? Mark.
I just support this wholeheartedly because of the need for a sort of refreshment and reinvestment into Highwoods and the community. So I know, Leader, you've been part of this as well. It's important that that area gets an investment in this way. I know the former councillors have continued to say that to us, so it's a part of listening to those comments that we have had over the years, and this is an investment whilst we wait for others. As you know, as a councillor of Mile End as well, that you've had new community centres going in there, so we are seeing that northern part of Colchester being served by good community centres, and this is a way of regenerating what you've got there in Highwoods as well. So support this wholeheartedly.
Thank you. You described the balance that I wanted to come across. Richard.
Chair, I just wanted to put on the record that we had there's a slight mistake in the report that I just wanted to correct that. At paragraph 1.3, the available section 106 receipts should be 14,000, not 18,000, and it is referred to as 40,000 elsewhere in the report.
Thank you. Thank you for the record noted. That's not material, but thank you for pointing it out. The essentials here in terms of total investment. And as you say in the text, the contributions to it are clear, and the purpose is clear, the need is clear. So, colleagues, do we agree?
Agreed.
Thank you. Yes, we'll retrieve Councillor Alison Jay. Councillor Jay, welcome back. You weren't absent for long. Now, this has been long trailed, this last item, so we don't need to elaborate that, but this has been coming for a long time, much discussed, again, cross-party, cross-community, and with residents. The next item is item 12.1, where we'll get ourselves into Fieldgate, and there's two phases here, and Councillor Mark Corey will pick out for us those two phases and how we intend to use the authority that they provide. Mark.
Thank you. Just to briefly give a bit of context, some people might not understand where Fieldgate Quay is. It's along the river, which we have responsibility for as the riparian owners and responsible actors on the river. If you're going out of Colchester downriver to the wonderful community of Wivenhoe, it is on the right-hand side, downriver, within the Old Heath and Hythe and Rowhedge ward. So you could say it's part of Old Heath, where the sheet piling along the river that we call Fieldgate Quay, where there's also the outlet for Anglian Water, that has fallen away over the last 2 years, and that has been monitored. It has been monitored really in depth to ensure we don't see greater slippage, and it has stabilised over time. People have seen that and been really worried about it. We put out communications very early on about the safety of it. We ensured that it was shut off. That did mean access to the wonderful footpath down to Rowhedge was cut off for some time. We then did deliver a different footpath, so that means that route is now available again. But now we need to address the key sheet piling, the crumbling, that we need to sort that out. So this paper outlines the two-phase approach in order to deal with the immediate works, to confirm those immediate works after further investigations, and then to look into phase 2, which is to look at the rest of the quay along there, which it is right for us to do so. If part of the sheet piling has failed, then could the rest of it along that site also be in jeopardy? And from the investigations that were done, we are concerned it could be, so therefore it's right and proper to do the work across the whole patch to look at two phases of dealing with the immediate need and then ongoing work where we would like to naturalise the quay more. So instead of it just being the hard sort of industrial lines that it is at the moment, can we look at a more nature-led approach to naturalising that bank? So that is what we're attempting to do here. The recommendations are that we look at £100,000, which will go towards the first phase, and the second phase could cost up to £4 million. So we're allocating that budget within the teams and departments that will sit underneath me as resources portfolio holder. So it will delegate to officers and to me to further investigate those phases. So approval would be given to allocate that money, partly as contingency as well, to get on with phase one, but have the allocation of capital for phase two, should we need it. Also, the contractor is expert in this field, so we may need to sort of agree phase one and two in order to have the best economic deal with that contractor. That's something that we'll investigate and commit to. But this enables us to act immediately, but also to prepare for phase two, should we carry that out, should we find that we have the money that we can allocate. We have set aside a budget, but of course, like in the national economy as well, we have to make sure that the money that we have can fit and it fits the needs. But the need is there for the immediate and for the longer term repair of Fieldgate Quay, and this is setting in place the project to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrea.
Yeah, I just wanted to add my support to this work programme. It was a pair of Wivenhoe Town Councillors that first brought this to my attention and came up with some solutions, and obviously have nagged as well. Despite the fact it's in the ward of Hythe, we must remember that the river is a shared access, and anything that goes wrong with it, upstream or downstream, because it's tidal, is going to affect a lot of us. So I'm really pleased to see that this has come forward as a part of the work programme.
Thank you very much. My only, unless there's any other remarks, then my only observation would be just to bring out, Mark, as we've discussed away from this, that this is absolutely authority to press on with what must be done, which is phase one, but to acknowledge that when there are so many calls upon our finances, so many priorities to balance that a lot of that responsibility rests with you, or is your lead, that we will of course be thoughtful about the next stage, phase two commitments, and just ensure that before we do so, despite this prudent allocation, that we are content that that is the best balance to strike between different needs for capital funding, and you expressed that very well, and thank you. And no other remarks? Mark.
Sorry, I do think I misspoke at one point though. I just want to be clear, actually phase one, the cost of it, I think I said 500,000, is 905,000. So that's quite a difference. So that is the first allocation. I just wanted to make that clear. I don't like to misspeak too often. Thank you.
We hear the larger number. You've nearly doubled your estimate in the course of 4 minutes. But thank you, Mark. And this is as described in the paper, the approach, the conditioning remarks just given, but the authority as set out in item 2.1 and 2.2, and that's where you get a reference to the 500k, I think in 2.1. Right, colleagues, are we content to approve the paper and the direction to travel?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. The next item is the local highways panel. Mark, would you like to pick this up, and perhaps the two of us can do a tag team on this?
Yeah, I'm more than happy, Leader, as you actually have taken part in many of the discussions involving Essex Highways. Happy for you to take this on board. It is a recommendation from the scrutiny panel that I think you and I both agree in principle that we want to support all the works of Essex Highways, but in practice, I think, David, you've got a number of reasons that we are working with highways, we are contributing monies. I'll leave you to explain. Thank you.
Thank you. So the scrutiny panel meeting of 12th of March lies behind this, the discussion we're just having now, recommendation to consider authorising council funding, city council funding to the LHP has been done in 2018 or up to 2018-19. There is a difficult background here, and as a county councillor and the Liberal Democrat, as it happens, member who leads on the finances can completely understand the challenges for the county council, which are well known in terms of how they strike their balance about funding and its allocation. And highways have been undernourished, it's widely accepted. There have been some recent changes to that, but it's a difficult area for the county, and it has some consequences locally. So I completely understand the driver, which is to see whether the City Council could, in a structural way, commit to provide additional funding. I don't think that's appropriate, is my personal professional view, because it's a highways responsibility. But we have a very good relationship with Essex Highways, better than in years past. I'm very pleased about that. We're working very closely with the County Council on a whole variety of issues, including master planning. Under the Team Colchester label, we've been working together, and again cross-party, I'm pleased to say, and looking at regeneration of the city centre. And everything we do is mindful of the value of that cooperation. In my view, and the County Council haven't asked us to do this, it's perhaps just worth saying, this is not an area where we need to put City Council funding, not in the structural year-on-year way, which is the suggestion. But however, we have agreed, case by case, to look at where we might secure improvement for the city by helping the Essex County Council gather the resources and to make a commitment themselves. And one example, it's well known, is that the Essex County Council later this summer, I think it's now going to be August, are going to do some extensive works, I think of the order of £250,000, and we've offered a contribution towards that of some 50k. And I expect that there will case by case be places and towns where works across the city can just get over the line if the City Council is prepared to make a contribution. And I think case by case is the way that we should continue to address this. It doesn't muddle our responsibilities. It's in the spirit of our cooperation, and it will help things get done. So on that basis, on this occasion, I would decline the advice from scrutiny, but as I say, in the spirit of us working very much together with County Council as we have done before. So I think we hit the spirit, but not the detail of the recommendation. I'll be content. Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Which gets us on to another favourite, which is the draft statement of accounts, and have visiting councillors, Paul Dundas and Sarah Naylor, in whatever order you choose. I think, Paul, you are down first. Okay, Sarah, please come forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, excuse me. Just to for everyone to be aware, I'm a member of GNA, and I was at the meeting that's referred to here, and we just want to do two things. First of all, draw the minutes of this meeting to note that the Conservative members of GNA voted against noting the accounts, which may seem like a technical point, but it is a reflection of the deep concern that was felt by the Conservative members about these draft statements of accounts. And we would really urge the Cabinet to act on the recommendation that came out of that particular meeting. So the recommendation to the Cabinet is that the consequences of disclaimed accounts be investigated and planned for. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to stress how very important that recommendation is, and to urge you to embrace that recommendation in the best interest of the council taxpayers, who are ultimately the individuals who must bear the burden if this isn't adequately addressed and got right. So I just wanted to leave that there and encourage you, please, to accept the recommendation.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Alison Jay. I listened to that discussion, so I do understand the sentiments and the drivers, but I should, for the record, be very clear that there is, from my perspective and the majority view of governance and audit, where we're at is not a lack of professionalism. We need to be quite clear about this on behalf of our council Section 151 officer and his team, nor our difficulties with getting accounts through a logjam process, and Councillor Jay will touch on this. Is anything that can be changed at this time? We're inside a sea of national audit delays, and we spent a long time, didn't we, in governance and audit, Sarah, just working through that. So it's very important that we don't suggest to the public that we've got an underlying problem or issue with the ability to produce, declare and follow through on our accounts and provide a picture that's true to the facts of the council and its past and present performance. Alison, I'll go to you if you could, and then we'll come back to you, Sarah, if you've got a remark at the close.
Okay, well, I can only reflect along similar lines. Governance and audit, again, of which I at the time was a member, were required to note the 22-23 uncertified draft accounts. I'd like to thank all those members for their attention and the fairly robust debate at that time, which I think is useful and warranted. We are aware that there are statutory provisions for auditing of accounts and a limited number of firms that are authorised to do so. There's been a lack of capacity, not from ourselves, because we're ready to push ahead with the accounts, but BDO, who are our current auditors, have not been in a position to drive this forward, as they haven't been across the country. The delays are in line with those being experienced by many local authorities in obtaining audited accounts on time, and this has happened over a number of years. We are doing better than most in pushing forward. The intent is the audit will be completed by September 2024 and may well be subject to a disclaimer, which is not ideal, but given time constraints and the need to move forward, and the fact that we're now in a position of looking at 23-24 and moving into 24-25, that with national guidance, looking at the accounts on this disclaim basis may be given, and then the appropriate guidance will be given by the LGA and CIPFA. It must be remembered that accounts are prepared fully in compliance with CIPFA accounting codes. They apply to all local government authorities and are reconciled by our senior officers who have considerable expertise. Section 151 officers have provided assurance that if a disclaimed audit opinion is recommended, there will be professional and national guidelines on the basis they could be accepted. Accounts would only be signed off with an assurance that those guidelines have been met. It's a decision over which we, the council, have little control. There is a way of dealing with the backlog of audit work and allowing us to move forward. I would say that we remain confident in our draft accounts, that historically there's been little material adjustment to accounts once drafted, and that we are ready to move on to the next stage, but will accept the recommendation.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Councillor Jay, for accepting the recommendation. That's very much appreciated. However, I do want to make 2 points, if I may, that I think memory serves me well, the auditors promised to audit these accounts by the 30th of April of this year, and I don't believe that that has been met. So there's a pattern here where we're definitely hoping for the best and getting the worst continually, hence the recommendation to take appropriate and prudent action, which I'm glad you've accepted. I think one of the things we just want to say is, again, no disrespect to the councillor and the portfolio holder, but obviously this also doesn't look good from the outside when we have members of GNA who are also members of Cabinet, and in effect scrutinising, well, that's the wrong word, looking at decisions that were made by Cabinet and revisiting them in Cabinet. I'm not suggesting that that has influenced any outcome here. It is not ideal, and after all said and done, we are trying to communicate to residents that everything is as it should be.
Thank you. I understand both those remarks. I'm glad that there's a middle meeting ground here, which is that we absolutely have been doing this as well as circumstances allowed. You've described what's still happening in the audit industry. And let's not go into who's responsible, but I could point a finger at governments over time about this. We as a local authority have got to do the best job we can, haven't we? And robust test of that through governance and audit is a real help, and I value that cross-party, and there's no difference in that approach, frankly, to that of Cabinet. We'd be nuts to do anything other than welcome challenge, but we can't go faster than the audit process will allow us. Thank you, Sarah, for bringing your points out. Colleagues, we have, I think, agreed to take the remarks in the way that we have just described this.
Yes, I think so.
Paul, I beg your pardon, Paul.
I'm obviously making an impression tonight, aren't I?
You obviously are.
Actually, Councillor Naylor has covered most of the points I was going to make, and I fully endorse what she said. And I'm pleased to see here that you are going to accept the recommendation of the GNA committee. I just wanted to very briefly pick up, though, perhaps a little bit on what disclaimed accounts actually mean. It means that a third party hasn't been able to obtain sufficient evidence from us or the entity to provide any sort of opinion or assurance that the set of financial statements are correct. That's not my definition, that's the Institute of Chartered Accountants of England and Wales. And with a set of disclaimed accounts, there's always a basis of disclaimer, and that's a disclaimer opinion which says why they are disclaimed. Now, we might have one opinion, and our Section 151 officer might have one opinion, but and we may be saying, well, we're fine and it's all the auditor's problems. If you get a set of disclaimed accounts, until you know what they put on it, you don't really know what you're dealing with, because they may have an entirely different view as to why they're disclaimed. So what I'm saying is, before you reach a conclusion that it's all fine, it'll go through or whatever, until you know what that disclaimed opinion is, you're not out of the woods, because they might be quite cutting. I don't know. I think they're unlikely to say it's all our fault. But all I'm saying is you do need to have some idea where it's heading. If we are heading for disclaimed accounts, I don't think we are at that situation yet, as far as I'm aware. But clearly it was discussed at GNA, so I assume that, as Councillor Jay's just said, admitted it's a possibility. Until you actually know what he's going to say, then you don't really know what you're dealing with. That's the only point I would make.
Paul, that's got to be right. Only when we know, and that's, I guess, our shared position. And that's why there's a limit to what one can do ahead of time. We have to start with what we know, and it is worth repeating it briefly. We have a history of being ready for the auditors when they can come and test the quality of our accounts. And we have not had any, to my knowledge, any material differences. There's often small and technical, and they can matter, but no material differences between the presentation of our accounts by our accounting staff, as blessed by the Section 151 officer, and the auditors. And that should give us a starting point of confidence. And if there was any material evidence to the contrary from any, we would all want to know it, because it's fundamental to the health of the council you've led, could lead, whoever has that owner's privilege, we collectively want to be in the position of understanding where we're at. So my position is unchanged, really, which is absolutely respectful of the fact that a disclaimer, which is the government's term, really, it's the way they've framed this, could be applied. We need to see what comes with it. It will be the detail that will matter. So it is shared ground. I just want to repeat, though, what I've just said. I won't say it again. But that we'll follow best practice. We'll follow LGA and SIPFA guidance. Those are the accounting rules that will help us work our way through this. But we can't jump ahead of the assessment itself. And again, I hope that's your caution is mine, in other words.
Thank you. No, that's fine. All I just say is there is a difference to a set of accounts with a disclaimer to a set of disclaimed accounts. They're not the same thing, and there's a huge difference between the two. So we need to be very clear what we're talking about.
We're all waiting, aren't we? Thank you very much indeed. And my apologies that the soft shoe shuffle at the back there, I missed you coming forward again. And thank you for taking the time and trouble, and to Councillor Naylor as well, of ensuring we understand the different perspectives on this issue. Thank you, Councillor Jay. Anything else from any other? Right. Then I can legitimately this time close the item as discussed. Agreed. Agreed? Thank you. Right. There are no public speakers on the next item, which is the Members Development Group. Let me go over to yourself, Councillor Jay.
Okay, so the Member Development Group is a forum for cross-party exchange of views, and the focus is very much on the delivery, content and evaluation of member development opportunities given to us by way of briefings, workshop and external training, in a variety of areas reflecting the work programme across the whole council. It's important to our development and our well-being, as is being kept up to date and informed, particularly those that are not in portfolio holder positions and within Cabinet. It's been chaired by myself for the last year. The group is required to report annually for Cabinet Note. As you will see from the content of the report, in terms of provision, an increasing number of councillors have been attending briefings and workshops and are attending more each. The Chief Executive briefings and budget workshop have been particular interest and well attended, and we're happy that those are continuing. There have been external opportunities taken by several councillors. Specific carbon literacy training was requested by the E&S committee and was provided by an external provider and well received and attended. Importantly, all the activities that provided were within the budget set. So I would just ask that Cabinet note the report, the value of the Member Development Group, and thank those members who took part and were present at all meetings. And if I can also minute appreciation of the time given and effort by officers and external providers in providing detailed and frequent briefings, which are of benefit to us all.
Thank you very much, very well expressed. Any additional remarks from colleagues? No, thank you, Councillor Jay, for your part in this too. It really matters how we develop, provide opportunity to members of so many different backgrounds to ensure that they feel as comfortable as they can and as sighted as they can when they represent their residents and influence and contribute to the work of the council. So thank you very much indeed. As recommended, 2.1, do we agree? Agreed. Thank you very much indeed. Next item is progress responses to the public. Richard, would you like to just give a heads up on that?
Thanks, Chair. Yes, I don't have anything to add to the report, Chair. It's as drafted.
Thank you. Position here is we have a running list of people who ask questions of us in formal settings. Many approach us informally, email in person, but this is a formal piece of work that logs that we know what's happening and we respond as we should, and it shows us up to date as best I could tell. All right, so representations from the public, then we're on track. Thank you very much. Noted. Thank you very much indeed. In which case we go to item 16.1. I beg your pardon. To exclude the public. Oh yes, we need to. Yes, we do need to do that, don't we? Please go over to you before we go into part B.
So this is the exclusion of the public, as we are now finishing the main agenda and moving to part B, which are the confidential items on the papers. So in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 and in accordance with the Local Authorities Arrangements and Regulations 2012, to exclude the public, including the press, from the meeting so that any items containing exempt information in part B of this agenda can be decided. Can we pass that recommendation?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you.